Welcome back to Global Redline. This special edition of Redline Global is being broadcast both from Lahore and Beirut in collaboration between SAMAA and SEN. Strait of Hormuz is the centerpiece of war and peace in the world right now. Donald Trump is moving to Beijing and everybody is looking at this summit. But this Strait of Hormuz, which was relatively unknown to general public, has become a household name. We want to fix our analytical gaze on Strait of Hormuz and what it means to the world as we see it unfold right in front of our eyes, unpredictable, chaotic. But let's start with defining what Strait of Hormuz is. To Beirut, where a report is ready with Leticia Castro.
Thank you, Talat. We're talking about 33 kilometers. That is all that separates the Arabian Peninsula from Iran. And that narrow strip of water, like you mentioned, that many didn't know about, the Strait of Hormuz is the jugular of the global economy. Close it and oil prices spike. Trade stalls and economies from Karachi to Tokyo feel the pressure within days. When it shut down during the U.S.-Iran war, it wasn't a regional problem. It was everybody's problem. And that's why everybody is now talking about it. Sahil Murlimingani explains.
By now, you would have seen enough about the Strait of Hormuz, but what you're going to watch on the show now is something special because we'll explain to you in easy-to-understand language and with the help of animation why it's so critical and why Iran is a tough power to mess with. Because one of its big strengths is its location. That already provides Iran powerful leverage right there. With the Strait of Hormuz now closed, and pressure mounting at the second economic checkpoint, which is Bab al-Mandeb. Add to that, a US naval blockade now coming into the picture. Your wallet is set to feel even more pressure over the next few days, much more than what it is feeling now, because these are not ordinary sea routes. They are critical economic choke points for the world. The Strait of Hormuz, for that matter, is just 21 miles wide, yet 30% of the world's oil supply, that's 20 million barrels every day transported by the sea, pass through it. In addition, LNG shipments that help supply energy to Europe also travel through this corridor. That LNG keeps cars moving, airplanes flying, and factories operating worldwide. That's the reason why you're seeing flight rates blasting through the roof and worldwide cancellations. Now here, as you can see, because tanker traffic right there is so concentrated, vessels passing through this become relatively easy targets for drones and missiles coming in from Iran. And it's not that it hasn't happened before. It did happen in the past. Look, during the tanker war of 1988 and once again in 2019, those attacks happened, and even limited attacks on those shipments sent oil prices soaring. But there is a second strategic choke point that we spoke about. Let's tell you more about that. Bab al-Mandeb right there. This passage controls entry to the Red Sea and then onwards to the Suez Canal. 30% of the world's container shipping moves through this corridor. Even this came under attack. In 2023, attacks in this very same region reduced shipping traffic by almost 70%, leading to massive hikes in cost. Now, to make this equation worse, the US Navy is carrying out its own naval blockade right here. The US has defined this red line as an exclusion line. This line we are seeing on the sea, it's like an imaginary dividing line between the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman. Ships from Iran or those affiliated with Iran are prohibited from crossing the red line. They are being turned back by the US Navy. What we are seeing here, these blue boats are the US naval assets. They include aircraft carriers, destroyers, a submarine, and 6 ships specialized in mine clearance. Now imagine, in addition to these blockades that we spoke about, if Bab al-Mandeb also gets shut down, oil prices would surge further, inflation would climb even higher, and global trade would slow down like you have never seen before. This is where Iran's real leverage lies, and the impact, as you are seeing, never remains limited to the region. It would be felt across the world, it is being already felt across the world, but the impact, if such blockades continue, will be unimaginable.
Indeed, it is affecting us all. Thank you so much, Sahil. We want to go back to you in Lahore, Talat, to further discuss the current situation and, of course, how this is shifting not only the Middle East, but South Asia as well.
Thank you very much. This is a great setting for our debate. We have guests from Geneva, we have guests from New York and Tehran. Let me introduce them to you, and we want to look at Strait of Hormuz, which really is not straight anymore. It's a bit of a tangle in which the whole world's peace and war prospects are caught up. Ahmed Fatih from New York, Global Affairs Analyst and Managing Director of American Television News. Thank you very much for being with us. We have Ali Wez, who is an Iranian American analyst, director of the Iran project at the International Crisis Group. He's joining us from Geneva. And from Tehran, we welcome Talat Hussain, a journalist. Thank you very much, all three of you. Starting with you, Mr. Fatih, if I were to use Tim Marshall's or borrow Tim Marshall's book title, is the world prisoner of geography? Let's say prisoner of Strait of Hormuz at this point in time?
Yes, the world is a prisoner of geography. The world is a prisoner of Hormuz. The world is a prisoner of the geopolitical system that's in place in the world. We are not. We live in a world that we have many variables that would be taken into account when speaking about the condition of the world. Hormuz have its significance, of course, the energy. This is the bloodline for any industrial economy. 90% of Japan's energy imports comes from this region and uses the Strait of Hormuz, which is now disrupted. South Korea isn't the same. China, while it buys almost 80 to 90% of Iranian oil, before the blockade, I don't think that they had a problem in getting their tankers across the Strait of Hormuz without any harassment or intimidation from the IRGC. But still, Europe depends on not just oil, also liquefied natural gas, which is a major now source for conversion on power stations to accommodate the resilience steps needed with climate change. So it is very precarious situation, and we have nothing to do at this stage but watch and anticipate what will the upcoming President Trump and President Xi Jinping summit in Beijing will bring.
All eyes on them, Ahmed, all eyes on them. But let me bring in Ali Wez at this point. Ali, this world has known the term geopolitics for a very long time. I mean, we grew up reading about geopolitics, and we knew about the importance of geography. So what did the world didn't understand? Specifically, what did the Americans didn't understand about the diktat of geography? Did they misread this bottleneck's importance? Was this not part of their plan, or was this the plan really?
It's good to be with you. Yes, you're right. Look, this is something that geography had granted Iran, but Iran had never used until this point. So it had never used it. It was always part of war gaming in the United States that there is the possibility that Iran might try to weaponize the Strait of Hormuz. In the run-up to this conflict, Iranians, in fact, did even do exercises, military exercises, and announced that if they are attacked, they will close down the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. underestimated this not because the military didn't understand the risk, but because the president deliberately, and coming out of the Venezuela episode with a hot hand, with the very stunning success at a very low cost in Venezuela. He thought by decapitating the Iranian system, they would surrender before they would even get a chance to close down the Strait. Or if they would do so, they would back off with threats of U.S. Military escalation. Both of those calculations have proven to be incorrect. And in fact, in the process of trying to prevent Iran from developing a weapon of mass destruction, the United States ended up granting it a weapon of mass disruption.
Okay, John, if I could ask you, what is the assessment of Iranian capability to keep using the Strait of Hormuz as a card? I mean, is this a permanent card that they believe they have in their hand to negotiate with the world, or is it a card of huge strategic significance but with a shelf life date on it?
Thank you so much, Mr. Talat, for inviting me. As Mr. Weiss correctly pointed out, the nuclear weapon could not be given to Iran, but Iran instead took Hormuz, which it sees now as a permanent solution to all of the leverage that the United States has had over Iran. And now the Iranians are trying to establish a Persian Gulf Strait Authority. They've already launched it. And under the new authority, they will exercise the right of the Geneva Convention 1952, where they will control the Strait of Hormuz within their territorial waters, and of course with the collaboration of the Oman authorities. And Iran plans to take tolls. Iran plans to keep this area in control to ensure that safe passage is given not only for the others, but also to protect the Iranian sovereignty. So I think this is a permanent shift rather than a temporary control, because Iran does not have any confidence in the United States that if an agreement is reached, then the United States will uphold its agreements or will abide by the agreements that it makes.
But it really isn't about the U.S., Ahmed Fatih. John makes a very important point, actually italicizes it. We already knew about it, but the way he phrases it is very important. A permanent solution from the Iranian point of view to the leverage that the Americans are wielding against them. But, you know, this opens a Pandora's box. You have like 8 or 9 straits all around the world that allow you passage for trade and energy corridor and goods and services. You know, each country on either side of the strait or a narrow strip can claim it to be theirs, and tolls are imposed. That's a world that comes to a grinding halt as far as economic and trade transportation is concerned.
These assumptions are based on false claims. Number one, Iran, while it overlooks or in a position geographically overlooking the Strait of Hormuz, but so as the Sultanate of Oman also overlooks. The difference is that we live in a world based on rules. There is international law, there is law of the seas. Clearly, Strait of Hormuz is not an Iranian territory. Iran has no reason or fact to support that they have any sovereign rights. That's totally absurd claim. As far as leverage, disruptions have impact. With the global supply chains are structured even after post-COVID pandemic, it does not really allow for leeway for such issues related to maritime security. This is a very important issue. I understand there is a legal quagmire here, legal and political quagmire. We've been since the United States and Israel initiated the latest military operations on Iran. It's not going to be solved through military intervention. I don't think there is an appetite in Washington or anywhere else in the world to put boots on the ground. So that eliminates the overall assumptions of an invasion like what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not in the cards so far. But still the United States have military leverage. Still the United States has economic leverage, whether through the blockade on the Iranian ports or whether through further weakening it through sanctions. And there are set of sanctions, I believe, that they are in the work in the Treasury Department and the White House. But we wait and see. But any claim of Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz is totally debunked.
Okay, let me bring in Ali here. Ali, let's expand the debate on this one. We talk about Iranian leverage. Is Strait of Hormuz really the leverage that Trump is using to negotiate with the Chinese? Because he seems really cool about, at least in his statements, about the blockade of a blockade. And he keeps on talking about this being the greatest maneuver ever. I mean, everything about what he does is the greatest ever. But let's take his words at face value. Is this the negotiating table tactic that he's using to talk to the Chinese and draw concessions on other fronts? Because after all, it's the Chinese whose economy depends, like 90% of the oil goes to them through the Strait of Hormuz that passes through this small passage. Is this a Washington leverage with Beijing?
I don't think so. In fact, I think we should look at it the other way around, in the sense that China had a stockpile of oil in its strategic reserve. And of course, remember that until the US imposed its own blockade on top of the Iranian blockade, Iran was exporting historic levels of its oil exports to China. So China still has sufficient cushion and is not as desperate as the rest of the world is for the reopening of the Strait. In fact, I think the very fact that President Trump ended up going to Beijing after postponing that trip once without the Strait open puts him in a position of weakness. Because if the US blockade was effective, why would President Trump launch Project Freedom to get the trapped vessels out of the Gulf, and immediately stop that operation because it actually failed to deliver? It risked completely undermining the ceasefire and reigniting the conflict. And so, and the threats and sanctions and everything else he has done has really not budged the Iranians, either in their negotiating position or in their obstruction of the Strait. And so, in fact, President Trump is now going to ask help from President Xi in order to get the Chinese, who have tremendous leverage on the Iranians, to open the Strait. So I think this situation overall did actually end up putting the US in a position of weakness during this summit.
John, is Iran really overestimating how long can it play the Hormuz card?
Well, Mr. Talat, first of all, I'd like to bring in a few opinions regarding the legality of Iran. Iran clearly states that since the Strait of Hormuz is a 21 nautical mile area and the UNCLOS is not ratified by Iran, it is not ratified by the United States, and since 12 nautical miles is the permission given by the UNCLOS, I think even under the UNCLOS, there is some argument that Iran can make with respect to the Strait of Hormuz not being part of the high seas, although it is a part of the freedom of navigation regime. But even then, we see that the international law is toothless. It is a toothless body where it is selectively applied according to the Iranians. And there is a double standard when it comes to the application of the international law. With respect to whether or not Iran can hold it indefinitely, Houthis held the Bab el-Mandab Strait for 2 years. And then the United States had to come into an agreement with the Houthis that they will not attack Houthis and the Houthis will not attack them. So with the question of Hormuz and Iran, New York Times has recently reported still has 90% of its coastal bases, and they were not destroyed by the United States, a claim that has been reassessed by the New York Times itself. And we see that even if Iran loses its missile capabilities or drone capabilities, Iran still has many submarines which it can navigate through the shallow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, which are in 180 to 220 feet. And I think that the argument can be made that even if everything is destroyed in terms of the missile and drone capabilities, the fast attack boats of Iran and its nuclear and its mini submarines are able to effectively counter any threats that it feels are a threat to Iran. So the question of whether or not it can hold it is already visible to us when Project Freedom was launched, and nothing really happened with that Project Freedom. Trump has been blaming the Australians, the Taiwanese, the Japanese, the South Koreans for not supporting him. He has been blaming NATO. He has been blaming the European countries. So we see that the status quo for now is that Iran has been controlling the Strait of Hormuz, and it is the question of capacity has, I think, been resolved, and it would not so be subtle for the United States to question the legality of it, since the United States has time and time and again violated its own international law agreements.
These are fantastic arguments. I wish I had the time to go to Ahmed Fathi on this, but Mr. Ahmed, we will come to you in another segment. Fascinating debate, as always, Ali Weiss and John Hussain and Ahmed Fathi. Thank you very much for joining us. Our Redline Global transmission continues. When we come back, we bring to you from Beirut and Lahore a perspective from journalism's point of view. What does it take to cover this war and conflict, some of our personal experiences, as well as the horrendous data that we'll be sharing with you in terms of journalistic casualties. It's good to be on the field, but it's also hugely dangerous. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Redline Global Special from Lahore, Pakistan and Beirut, Lebanon. We are combining our strengths and our editorial content to produce something truly remarkable in Pakistan's media history, giving you a 3D perspective on issues of great import. But remember, these are all journalists who are working overtime to provide you information, and this is a hazardous profession. Today we want to dedicate this part of the program about coverage of events that generally look simple, but they are not that simple, and they entail heavy losses to journalists as well. My colleague Letitia is there in Beirut. She has a few thoughts and a report to run on journalists in the line of duty and what it means to them. And then we will share some personal experiences as well, and you will get an insight into what it's like to be a journalist on the field.
Thank you, Talat. Far beyond simple. Of course, like you mentioned, journalism is actually recognized by the UN as one of the most dangerous professions in the world. And actually here in Lebanon, so far this year, it has become the deadliest country for media workers around the world. So we talk about these headlines, but behind those headlines, there are men and women who risk everything to bring you the stories that we see. In programs like this, journalists covering the Middle East conflicts were killed in numbers that shocked even veteran war correspondents. Today, Stephanie Haddad reports on what the death of journalists means for the truth.
2024 was deadliest year for journalists ever recorded by Committee to Protect Journalists, almost 70% killed by Israel. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPG, at least 370 journalists and media workers have been killed worldwide from 2023 until today. Gaza has become the deadliest conflict for journalists ever recorded, with CPG reporting at least 260 journalists killed since the war began, while Lebanon has also seen a rising toll with 15 journalists and media workers killed since the war on Gaza started. In 2023, the Middle East has become one of the deadliest regions in the world for journalists. And the danger is not only in Gaza. The numbers show a sharp escalation: 99 killed in 2023, 124 killed in 2024, 129 killed in 2025, and 18 documented so far in 2026. Journalists have also been killed while covering conflict and instability in places like Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, Mexico, Palestine, Myanmar, Iraq, and Haiti. In Lebanon, the Committee to Protect Journalists says 15 journalists and media workers have been killed by Israeli fire since October 7, 2023.
It has been 1 year since Israeli tank fire killed our colleague, Issam Abdallah.
Some were covering the war from the south, some were inside media vehicles, and some were in homes or buildings later hit by airstrikes. In 2024 alone, 3 journalists and media workers killed in Lebanon were documented, and in 2026 the toll continued. In March, an Israeli strike on a media car in southern Lebanon killed 3 journalists, Ali Shaib, Fatima Ftouni, and Mohammed Ftouni. Days later, journalist Amal Khalil was killed in southern Lebanon after Israeli strikes hit the area where she and photographer Zainab Faraj were reporting. Rescue workers were prevented from reaching the crew and called for an urgent international investigation. For press freedom groups, the pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Journalists covering war are being killed while doing their work. In Syria, the danger is different, but it has lasted for years. After more than a decade of war, journalists still face killing, detention, disappearance, and intimidation. In 2024, 4 journalists and media workers were killed in Syria, and the risks did not stop after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. In 2025, journalists were killed, wounded, shot at, and blocked from entering Sweda as violence spread in southern Syria. In Iran, CPG has documented at least 1 journalist killed in 2026, Masoud Salimi, a freelance journalist killed in March. And beyond killings, press freedom groups say journalists in Iran continue to face arrests, intimidation, censorship, and severe restrictions, especially during moments of political or military escalation. In Pakistan, the danger comes less from one front line and more from a climate of political unrest, militant violence, intimidation, and impunity. In 2024, CPG documented 6 journalists and media workers killed in Pakistan. In Sudan, the war has made journalism almost impossible. In 2024, 6 journalists and media workers were killed. And in 2025, that number rose to 9 as Sudan's civil war continued to turn cities, homes, and newsrooms into battlefields. From Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria to Pakistan and Sudan, the pattern is clear. Journalists are being killed not only on the front line, but wherever truth becomes dangerous to report. Because in war, journalists are not only documenting history, too often they are becoming part of it.
Unfortunately, thank you, Stephanie, a terrible situation. Talking about these numbers makes us realize how dangerous the situation is for us all. And of course, sharing my thoughts with you, Talat, back in Lahore, I am Mexican-American, coming from the U.S. just a few months ago. We have our own issues in the U.S. when it comes to biased media coverage. On the Mexican side, of course, with organized crime and the cartels going after journalists as well, that's definitely a dangerous situation. But when it comes to being on ground in a war situation, I think nothing could have prepared me for the frightening situation that develops day by day, that instability, that chaos, and trying to work at the same time, trying to get those stories out. But of course, feeling it on a personal level is definitely a different kind of frightening. I want to get your perspective. I know you've covered conflict zones for many years. So what's your take on this?
Look, it's astounding, the numbers that you put out in the report that you broadcast. What really strikes me as a hardest fact is that over 355 journalists were killed, and they are either from the Middle East or areas around the Middle East. So you had Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and then adjoining you have Sudan and Yemen. Of course, Ukraine is at a distance. But if you were to look at it as an expanded zone of threat to journalists, Middle East and the adjoining areas remain the core threat. You mentioned reporting from the war zones. We have done that not because this was a choice that we exercised, but because of the nature of the profession and the geography that dictated the nature of work. I was part of the media team that boarded the first flotilla that went to Gaza and was hijacked by the Israelis and attacked by the Israelis in 2010. And I can tell you this was among the 3 times when I was the closest to getting killed, and 10 of the people on board were killed. About 67 were brutally injured, and then we were taken into Israeli prisons, which was a horrendous experience to begin with. But frankly, the way journalists were treated with utter contempt and suspicion had got nothing to do with who they were, everything to do with what they were doing. And what they were doing, Lajecia, were documenting. And that's the problem with journalism for those oppressors of human rights and violators of human rights, or drug cartels, or criminal gangs, or thugs, or rogue states, that they do not want their crimes to be documented. So the first question always was, do you have visuals hidden somewhere? This was a time of DV cams. We didn't have those, smart SIMs with us, except for one journalist who was able to, film it and then sneak it out. There were only 3 videos that came out of that conflict. 2 of us were filmed by myself and my producer, another one by that journalist who was working with another organization. So they wanted to get hold of those visuals. All the cameras were taken away. All the mobiles were taken away, not because they had great data, but they had visuals. The documentation of crime is something that journalists always have to commit. But now things have changed. Looking at the brutality that you just documented and the sheer scale of the numbers, frankly, and I never thought I would live to say these words, how we were treated by the Israelis at that time looks like fairly normal by their standards of oppression. The way they have gone after the journalists now, hook, line and sinker, attacking vans and not just killing them ones and twos, but in huge numbers. So the matrix of the kill capacity has changed, the intention has changed, but the bottom line remains, nobody wants the crimes to be documented, to be shown to the public, which is the fundamental responsibility of journalists like myself and yourself and thousands of others across networks and borders who are putting themselves in harm's way just to bring that information out.
Talat, thank you so much for sharing those images with us here and for documenting the reality when you did years ago on the field, and of course doing it now. Like you mentioned, things are changing. Of course, the information that we get now is almost immediate. We're getting it not only through journalists, but everybody that is putting the videos out there, that's putting the information out there through social media. But I think that the role that we play as journalists now is very important, even more so because of social media, because you need to be able to rely on those avenues that give you the correct information. With the spread of disinformation, it's definitely an important job that we do. But like you said, the numbers are astonishing. It's sad to see the situations that are happening, specifically here in the southern portion of Lebanon, those journalists being killed specifically, systematically, being chased after. So it's definitely a frightening situation that we have happening here in the Middle East.
It sure is. Well, we can only hope for the best. We cannot get off the track of our main job. And what also, towards the end of it, Letitia, with my great compliments to your entire team to do a fantastic job in such a troubled region, just to be in that zone and to live through that uncertainty and then keep on doing your job takes the heart of a lion. So kudos to you. The only problem that I see now is that pens have been used as bombs. Mobiles have become munition, and drones that we normally use to film and document areas are now weapons of war. So it looks to me that somebody is sitting out there saying that all the instruments that journalists use to document the crime should become part and parcel of the crime itself. But life goes on, and hopefully we will have sanity prevail. Again, thank you very much for joining in, viewers. We now have to call it a day. This has been a remarkable experience. I hope you have enjoyed the debate from Lahore and Beirut. Good night for now, and see you another day.